the director of the Better Off Out campaign, Rory Broomfield, to introduce our speaker this evening.
Thank you so much. I'm tempted to say the excitement starts now. Well, of course, we have at the Freedom Festival a wonderful tradition of doing things in a fun way. We do things differently down here, in a way that actually makes it fun to be by the seaside. And as a result, this year, what can be more fun than have one of the greatest conservatives from one of the greatest conservative think tanks in the world, Ted Bromund from the Heritage Foundation, coming to speak to us about J.R.R. Tolkien. Wonderfully, he used to stay here, as we heard from Sir Mark earlier, and so now we can walk in the steps of one of the greatest English novelists there's ever been. But first, to describe his life and his connection to conservatism, it's my pleasure to introduce the wonder that is Ted Bromund.
Thank you, Rory. I have to say that when Sir Mark was making his opening remarks this evening, I was a little bit nervous he was going to use up all of my material, because I read that column when it came out last week, and I saw just the title coming up on my iPhone, and I thought, oh my God, I've been thinking about this for 6 months, and now he's gone and written a column on exactly the same thing that I was going to say, and now what I'm going to talk about this evening. But fortunately, it turns out that the column didn't really cover all there is to say about Tolkien and Brexit, and maybe even a little bit of conservatism, so I felt a little bit reassured after I read the piece. I just have to start off by saying that I have to sort of recognize Simon and Rory and Sir Mark for doing something I think is very wise, which is inviting an American to give the dinner speech. After all, Americans have made so many important, brilliant contributions even to this nation, to its sporting life, to its cultural life, to its political life, just over the last year. So it's entirely fitting that we have an American here to give the address this evening. Let me just run through a few of the highlights for you on the American side. First American manager in the Premier League this year, the superbly successful Bob Bradley at Swansea. Now, admittedly, only lasted 11 matches. So, perhaps you might not think that's so good. But remember, Claudio Ranieri won the league and he got the sack. Right? So it's not just Americans who have some difficulty working out how soccer works in England. Oh, sorry, football. Sorry. Trying to get that wrong again. Some of you may still watch Top Gear. Does anyone here still watch Top Gear? No. Well, I just want to say there's an American on Top Gear now, right? Matt LeBlanc. Right? No. I mean, he's had an amazing career, right? He's one of the friends, goes on to Top Gear, and, let me just remind you what he's done. He got rid of Chris Evans in under 4 months. So there's a real success for the United States right there. Okay, I grant you LeBlanc, not as good as Noel Edmonds, but thanks to the American, new Top Gear is almost as funny as old Top Gear was. So that's a success. And then, of course, the most important American in the United Kingdom over the last 12 months, President Barack Obama. Or, maybe I should say former President Barack Obama. What was that phrase he used last spring? Can anyone remember that one now? Back of the queue, thank you. Back of the queue it was, yeah. That's the way Americans talk. We don't need number 10 to feed us lines. Cues, aluminium, carrots, aubergines, fish fingers, zebra crossings, soccer. Oh, sorry, football. We'll get it right sooner or later. I think I'm right now in saying that the only nation at the back of the queue today, however, is Scotland. But seriously, President Obama, former President Obama, such a helpful guy. How much was he worth to the outcome of the Brexit referendum? Was it a point? Was it 2 points? Maybe it was 3 or even 4. Yeah. Now I hope that we at the Heritage Foundation, where I work, contributed just a little bit to that result. But even if we didn't contribute anything at all, we were delighted by the way that it worked out. Now, if we'd had a photo here, I was hoping to have a photo of this, but imagine it. On the morning of June 24th, we at the Heritage Foundation did something we've never done before. We raised the Union Jack over the Heritage Foundation. And we flew it there for a full week. Now, I unfortunately was not at Heritage at that point, thanks to Rory's kindness. I was in a club in London. I was in the basement of the club when the result came through, singing Rule Britannia, Jerusalem, and God Save the Queen. I've got it on my cell phone, and I'm not going to play it because the recording is terrible, the piano was out of tune, and we were out of tune, but we made up for it by being extremely loud. That was a wonderful evening and a wonderful morning. But I've got an even better memory of that night that I just want to mention. It was about 3:30 in the morning, and the results were coming in, and it was pretty clear how it was going to go. And I was sitting next to a lady in the club. I don't know her name, I wish I did. And she reached over and she grabbed my arm, and she looked at me in the eye and she said, "I am so proud of us." And I thought, yes. I knew exactly what she meant. It took a lot of courage to vote for Brexit. Everyone said, every world leader, every international organization, about every so-called expert told you you couldn't do it, and you shouldn't do it, and you wouldn't do it. They said you'd be alone. They said you'd be poor. They even said it would cause World War III. They had so many reasons why governing yourself wasn't the right thing to do. And you just had one reason on your side. It was the right thing to do. Now, doing that took a lot of courage. And Bournemouth knows a little something about courage, because tomorrow we'll have joining us a very courageous MP, a longtime friend of the Freedom Association, a Brexit stalwart, and a very good Thatcherite. So tomorrow we'll welcome Connor Burns here to be with us, and I want to recognize and thank Connor in absentia this evening in his constituency duties for all that he's done for the cause of freedom. But of course, Connor is not Bournemouth's only true Englishman. We've already been told this evening that this wonderful hotel is the summer home of J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. This fits, right? You really cannot imagine the author of The Hobbit jetting off to spend a summer in Mallorca. This is not right. For Tolkien, it's going to have to be the English seaside. Candy floss, stick of rock, penny machines, stripy deck chairs, and oceans just a little bit too cold for comfort. Sun that may shine or may very well not, as we see today. A very traditional English seaside holiday for a very traditional Englishman. Tradition's a very powerful word, and tradition is what you defended by voting for Brexit. The tradition of a freely elected parliament that makes the laws of the land. Well, where did the courage to make that vote come from? I think Tolkien can tell us just a little bit about that. So I'd like to spend just a few minutes telling you what Tolkien's thoughts on courage were. Let's just start off by acknowledging the obvious, that courage is a personal virtue and it's not evenly distributed. Some people just have more of it than others. But even the bravest person needs encouragement sometimes, and one source of encouragement, as we learn from Tolkien, is a sense of community, a sense of your people, a sense of your nation, and a participation in it. As one of the hobbits in Lord of the Rings puts it, it is best to love first what you are fitted to love, I suppose. You must start somewhere and have some roots. The world of Middle-earth, if you remember it from Lord of the Rings, is divided up into different peoples, not just hobbits, men, elves, and dwarves, but different cities and different communities of all of those people. Now, Tolkien doesn't endorse isolationism. Lord of the Rings, after all, virtually ends with the marriage of Aragorn, the human king of Gondor, and Arwen, an elven princess. So the idea isn't that you separate each other forever. But Tolkien does believe, in the words of an American poet, that good fences make good neighbors. Aragorn served, we should remember, for many years as a Ranger of the North. Does anyone remember what a Ranger of the North is in Tolkien's language? It's a boundary keeper, one who keeps and patrols the boundaries between different peoples. After Aragorn takes the throne, what does he do? He immediately gives the wild men a reservation of their own. He reserves the Shire for the hobbits. He declares the forest of Fangorn off limits to all but the Ents. And he reaffirms the relationship between the riders of Rohan and his own realm in Gondor. So in other words, everything he does immediately after taking the throne is done to reaffirm the traditional boundaries and borders between the peoples of Middle-earth. A well-ordered Middle-earth, in other words, is a little bit like the British Empire. The roads are kept clear of bandits, and while the king reigns in Gondor, most of his realm is governed locally. Why? Because the people of Middle-earth will be freer, better governed, more satisfied, and more capable of good relations with their neighbors if they govern themselves, rather than being ruled direct from Gondor. Tolkien has tremendous confidence, in other words, in the ability of free people, guided by tradition, to deal fairly with each other and to govern themselves wisely. As Tolkien himself puts it, quote, "The hobbits still said of wild folk and wicked things, such as trolls, that they had not heard of the king. For they attributed to the king of old all their essential laws, and usually they kept the laws of free will, because they were the rules, as they said, both ancient and just." There's a complete absence in Tolkien's work of rights. Rights, in the way that we conceive of them, are in Middle-earth an evil and a dangerous concept. Rather, as the solid, common-sense Hobbit Sam puts it, the world needs to be put back to rights by restoring traditional, established boundaries and order. Central to that is a king who will let free people govern themselves according to their own well-known, instinctual, deeply understood standards, which are the wisest guide. And Tolkien reminds us of this repeatedly. As Aragorn himself says, quote, "Good and ill have not changed since yesteryear. It is man's part to discern them." Or as another character says, "In doubt, a man of worth will trust to his own wisdom." Tolkien always affirms the importance of the free individual. Your decisions are your own to make, but you don't make them on your own. The power to decide rightly comes partly from within, that's the purely personal part, partly from your roots, and partly from your knowledge of yesteryear, your sense of tradition, of history. And that brings us to the second source of courage, history or tradition. When Frodo learns that the ring he holds is indeed the ring of power, he begins to despair. Gandalf immediately begins to tell of, quote, "a chapter of ancient history, which it might be good to recall. For there was sorrow then too in gathering dark, but great valor, and great deeds that were not wholly vain." Aragorn, the future king, is also deeply versed in history. And as the hobbits sit shivering in the shadow of Weathertop, awaiting attack by Black Riders, he, quote, "began to tell them tales to keep their minds from fear. He knew many histories and legends of long ago." In Lord of the Rings, history and tradition are the disciplines of good. Knowledge of the future, or rather the claim to have knowledge of the future, is evil. What is especially destructive is the kind of knowledge that seeks to pull society apart, to understand how it works, to fix it. In other words, modern knowledge. As Michael Gove put it in an oft misquoted remark, the problem is the expert. You see this best in one of the most revealing speeches in Lord of the Rings, when Saruman, a formerly good wizard, proposes that he and Gandalf cooperate with the evil Sauron, for, as Saruman puts it, as the power of Sauron grows, his proved friends will also grow, and the wise, such as you and I, may with patience come at last to direct its courses. Knowledge, rule, order. All the things we have so far striven for in vain to accomplish, hindered rather than helped by our weak or idle friends. The voice here is that of the expert, desirous of using power covertly to achieve ends that are known and wanted by no one. It is also, of course, the voice of a man hoping to fool others, but actually fooling only himself. Gandalf's reaction to Saruman's appeal is simple and telling. He that breaks a thing to find out what it is has left the path of wisdom. Society, in other words, has an integrity, not an inflexible unity, just an integrity, and that integrity should not be carelessly discarded or picked apart. History and custom are surer guides to action than a future supposedly known by the experts. Why? Because expertise rips away the context of tradition and customary knowledge that allows you to make better decisions. It renders you vulnerable to your merely personal and selfish desires and encourages you to mistake what you personally want for what is wise and right and good. Custom and tradition is what limits selfishness. It doesn't force you to make better decisions. Sometimes you still make wrong decisions, but it helps you and guides you. In that sense, the Ring of Power in Lord of the Rings is very modern. It senses what you want, and it seems to give it to you. And that is extremely dangerous. For Tolkien, the essence of modernity is the immediate satisfaction of personal desires, unrestrained by any sense of tradition. Tolkien, thus, is a conservative, perhaps a Whig, in the tradition of Edmund Burke. This is an English conservatism that does not reject all change, but which is skeptical of a particular kind of supposedly modern expertise. If you wanted to classify him as a philosopher, the closest one is probably Michael Oshot.
Yeah.
And the Shire, of course, is England, as Tolkien wished it had remained. Sam, a stand-in for the common soldier of World War I, is its representative. We should remember, after all, that Tolkien was a soldier in the Great War, which he survived and all of his friends did not. The kind of society of the Shire, the kind of England that Tolkien was describing, has tremendous power. But it's the power of stability, of perseverance, of resistance, not the power of assertion and attack. How is that power to be preserved? Partly by self-government, partly by tradition, but also partly by the kind of language that we use. Tolkien, of course, was a great scholar of language, and Lord of the Rings is a work of philology, history, and rhetoric. Tolkien thought very deeply about rhetoric, about the words he used and the effects he was trying to achieve with them. He believed that language was a moral issue for Middle-earth and for us. As Tolkien himself put it, speaking not in The Lord of the Rings, quote, "This sort of thing, the building up of a poetic language out of words and forms, archaic and dialectical, or used in a special sense, may be regretted or disliked. There is nonetheless a case for it. The development of a form of language familiar in meaning, and yet freed from trivial associations, and filled with the memory of good and evil, is an achievement, and its possessors are richer than those who have no such tradition." So again, we come back to the importance of tradition. As Winston Churchill put it, it is well to study the wisdom of the past, for all wisdom is not new wisdom. Again, like Tolkien, interestingly, Churchill was fascinated by courage. Courage, he once commented, is rightly esteemed the first of human qualities because it is the quality which guarantees all others. Churchill never claimed to have been the British lion. "I was not the lion, but it fell to me to give the lion's roar," he said. It was the people who were courageous. In Lord of the Rings, the best illustration of the courage of free people is found in the first volume. It's always moved me because it sums up the moral appeal of Tolkien's work. Let me set the scene for you. Frodo and his friends, joined by Aragorn in his identity as Strider, have taken refuge from the Black Riders in Barlivet Butterbur's Inn in the town of Bree. Frodo explains his predicament to Butterbur. Quote, "These black riders, I'm not sure, but I fear they come from Mordor," said Strider in a low voice. "From Mordor, Parliament, if that means anything to you." "Save us!" cried Mr. Butterbur, turning pale. The name evidently was known to him. "That is the worst news that has come to Bree in my time." "It is," said Frodo. "Are you still willing to help us?" "I am," said Mr. Butterbur, "more than ever. But I don't know what the likes of me can do against, he faltered. "Against the shadow in the east," said Strider quietly. "Not much, Barleyman, but every little helps." Well, yeah, every little does help. It certainly wasn't the Heritage Foundation that won the referendum. It wasn't Barack Obama who won it. It wasn't the Sun who won it. It wasn't Connor Burns, or even, God bless it, the Freedom Association. It was you who won it. It was all of you who won it. You all did your little. And together, you've saved England by your exertions, and you may just have saved Europe by your example. It's a tradition, I guess, for the audience to thank the speaker, but I think this time it's the speaker to thank the audience. Thank you for your courage, thank you for your exertions, and thank you for your example. Please join me in a round of applause to the heroes of Brexit. You. Thank you, and have a wonderful free evening.
Thank you very much, Ted. That was an absolutely wonderful and inspiring speech. And you know, I remember the early hours of the 24th of June very well. I came back in from a local count in Beverley, and it was about 3:30 a.m. and I went upstairs to see if my wife was still awake. And I said, you know, we're almost there. We're going to do it. And she was awake because our 5-day-old son had woken her up. And the look on her face, oh, I won't forget it. And she said, well, that's absolutely great, Andrew. Right, take Dominic so I can get some sleep. So I did. I went downstairs and I was watching the television and you know, singing him to sleep, rocking him away there, and he did. And the moment that David Dimbleby said, the BBC now calls this for Brexit, there he was, fast asleep. Well, I couldn't jump up and down or anything like that. But I just sort of looked at him and said, that's for you. Because I remember very well Nicky Morgan, who was then Education Secretary. Remember her? Yeah. Who said, if you're going to vote to leave the European Union, think of your children and your grandchildren. Well, yeah, I did. That's exactly what I did, and that's why I voted to leave. So thank you very much, Ted. Courage is what it took, and I trusted the good old British people, and they didn't let us down. Before I let you all go and, well, probably stagger off to the bar, please remember that the bar at the Martian Cobb Hotel is open until about 4 a.m. And I know that some of you do make that, sometimes on a Saturday morning and a Sunday morning as well. However, once you've had your breakfast at either here at the Miramar or the Martian Court, we kick off proceedings tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Prompt, ladies and gentlemen, 10 a.m. prompt. And, you know, if you haven't had enough Bromund already, which I'm sure you haven't, Ted will be one of those panellists at the graveyard slot at 10 a.m. but we're looking forward to that. So we will see you all in the morning, 10 o'clock in the Hayek Hall, where we'll have another absolutely wonderful day tomorrow. Thank you very much.